So in this video, I'm just going to discuss what to do when the school denies your child evaluations. In my case, my son was denied speech evaluations based on his ESL status. So when we were adopting our boys in Ukraine, our youngest was very difficult to understand, not just for us, but everyone around him. Pretty much the only people that understood him were his two older brothers, and any other adult had a very difficult time knowing what he was trying to say. He had obvious chewing issues, some swallowing issues. He was very oral sensory seeking. So we knew without a doubt he had speech issues. It was told to us by the orphanage director and the social worker there, and it was listed in his medical file in Ukraine. So it seemed a no-brainer to me. We're going to come home, we're going to request speech evaluations for this child. So after we got home and enrolled the boys in school, I went up to school to have a meeting about Eli. And at this point, I had not requested any evaluations for him other than ESL services. This meeting was just simply to discuss the difficulties that he was having adjusting to being in a classroom. And in the course of this meeting, the speech therapist was sitting across the table from me, and I said, I absolutely want to request a speech evaluation for Eli. And she looked at me and she said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait a year, and we're going to give him a year to learn English, and then if you still think he has a problem, we'll assess him then. And I was just so taken back, like I have been many times in this process. What I wished I had then was a recording device. I wish I had been recording her saying this, because later on down the road when I brought this issue up with administration, they either didn't believe me or they didn't care because I didn't have the proof to show that she denied the evaluation that way because it was verbal. So go on Amazon, get you a USB recording device, take it with you to the meeting, let them know you're recording. They are obligated to record along with you, I guess just to protect themselves, and record every single meeting, every interaction you have, because you just never know when a bunch of crap is going to come flying out of somebody's mouth telling you that your kid cannot be evaluated, and you're going to sit there and just, what? And you really need to have that on record when you go to file a complaint, because what they'll then say is they misunderstood you. They thought you were just discussing it. They didn't realize you were requesting it. So have it recorded. Always record when you're having a meeting. This meeting was very early on in our special education fight, and I just didn't know any better because this lady was actually from our church, and I very mistakenly trusted her and thought that she would care about my son, when in fact she was very nasty about the whole thing. So, what to do when you're in the meeting and they just flat out refuse to evaluate your child? What I did was the meeting was over. She refused to evaluate my son, said they weren't going to do it. That was the end of that. So I went home and I was very upset and frustrated because I've just come home with 3 new kids, one who has a very obvious severe disability, and the school system that I had placed a lot of trust in was refusing to even consider that he might have an issue for a year. They're telling me to wait a year, and my son was 7, so we're going to wait until he's 8 years old before we will even consider evaluating him. So I posted on Facebook. I was very upset. It was more of a vent. But I have a lot of adoptive mom friends that have been through a lot of similar situations, and they've been very helpful to me. So one of my friends said, oh, no, that's not okay. You need to call your state board of education, and you need to tell them that your school is refusing to evaluate your son. So that's what I did. It was a pretty quick Google search. I went on Google, State Board of Education. I found a phone number. I think I talked to a couple of different people, but basically I told them I need to file a complaint. My son's school is refusing to evaluate him for speech services, and this is not okay. This is not legal, but they're doing it. So the resolution to this one came really quickly. The next day, the school district had heard from someone in the powers that be that this was really not okay, and I was informed literally within 24 hours that my son was going to be receiving a speech evaluation. So it's definitely the parent's job to not take no for an answer, because just because someone says no does not mean that it is legal, and it does not mean that you have to accept it. You fight it. So my son was evaluated for speech services, and we had the meeting to determine his eligibility based on his evaluations. Now, by this point, the lady that did the evaluations, the therapist, was very obviously angry at me during the meeting. She was quite abrasive and rude, honestly. And when we went through the speech checklist, at the top of it, we went through articulation first, and Eli immediately qualified under severe. He immediately qualified for speech services because he had a severe articulation issue. And she told me, she said, well, we don't need to go any farther. There was 3 other segments on the speech checklist. She said, we don't need to go any farther. He's qualified. Because this was very early on in my special education fight for my kids, I didn't know any better. I still stupidly trusted the words that were coming out of her mouth and said, okay. So she just crossed through the other 3 categories and found him eligible for speech under articulation. And at that point, his speech IEP was going to be written. Now, speech is a standalone service, meaning that a child does not have to have an already existing IEP to qualify for speech services. Speech is a standalone IEP if the child qualifies. So we went to write the speech IEP, and the speech therapist presented 2 goals. One was the alphabet, and one was making a sound. And that was it. Now, my child was struggling significantly in his classroom. He did not understand anything that was going on. He could not read. He could not write. He could not do basic math. So I had been incredibly relieved that he qualified for speech because I knew it qualified him for an IEP, and it was my understanding that we could put goals in the IEP to help him. So when she presented the 2 goals, I was a little taken back. I said, okay, that's fine. Well, what else can we add to it? Like, he needs a lot more support. I'd like to put, a lot of other goals in here for him. And she said, no, we don't put anything in this IEP that doesn't pertain to speech, and he only qualified under articulation. So my son had an IEP with 2 goals that basically amounted to making a sound and learning letters. The other issue that I had was because his speech issues were so severe, I requested that he get speech therapy 3 times a week for 30 minutes each time. So I was requesting 90 minutes a week. And the speech therapist refused. She said, research actually shows that a child really only needs 10 minutes a week. A child can make progress with only 10 minutes a week of speech services. So she was offering 2 30-minute sessions a week. These were not individual, these were in a group with other kids. And Eli was very self-conscious of his speech issues, so he would not talk around other children, and I was concerned about that. I was really concerned that being in a group with other kids and then being very self-conscious about his speech issues, that he wasn't even going to work on his goals. She said that was not an option. One-on-one speech was not an option, and doing it more than 60 minutes a week was not an option. When I pressed on the 3 times a week, she finally relented, and she said, okay, fine. And she wrote something down in the IEP. And when I got it later to sign, I realized what she had done was moved it from 2 30-minute sessions a week to 3 20-minute sessions a week. So she didn't increase his service time at all. She just broke it down differently, which was not what I was asking for at all. So this was my first experience with trying to get evaluations and an IEP for a child that had severe learning disabilities. First I was denied, then I filed a complaint, then the therapist was openly hostile towards me in the meeting environment, and then my concerns and my requests were just not considered in the IEP. And also, I found out later, it ended up being probably almost a year later after I had filed other complaints and requested other evaluations. I sat in a meeting room with administrators because by now they'd brought in the people from central office because I was a troublemaker. I sat in a meeting room with them and had an administrator tell me, well, we can put whatever Eli needs in this IEP. Once a child has an IEP, it doesn't matter what they qualify under. You can put whatever goal they need in the IEP to address their academic deficiencies. And that was one of the only times I have ever cried in an IEP meeting room full of people, because I had been told to my face that you absolutely could not put anything in that IEP that did not pertain to speech. And then I'm being told by an administrator that actually, yes, you can. Yes, you could have. He could have had all kinds of other goals, accommodations, and help for a year prior to that. If I hadn't been lied to and just openly retaliated against and with such hostility for doing something as simple as advocating for my child. So sometimes when you advocate, people will be angry. That's not your problem. You're not there to make friends. You are there for your child, because if you don't advocate for your child, nobody else is going to. So remember, document, document, document. Record, record, record. If I had only recorded that meeting, I could have sent that recording to the State Board of Education. I could have sent it straight to an administrator and asked them to clarify. I just simply didn't know any better at that point in time. So absolutely always record every meeting, because even if you don't know better at that meeting, some point in time you may know better down the road and you will wish that you had recorded what was said to you. So I hope this is helpful, because the number one thing to remember when dealing with special education services is never take no for an answer.